Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey and I'm joined again by Sam Proof, who was unfortunately ill last week, but it's great to have you back, Sam. How are you
Good to be
doing?
back. All right. I apologize in advance if I run into any kind of reoccurring cough thing. I'll try my hardest to stay on the mute button. But yeah, aside from the lingering cough, I'm physically fine, totally healed, or better, I guess. And yeah, just getting on with stuff. How's everything with you?
Yeah, everything's going pretty well with me. I was just saying to Sam before we started, it's funny how if there are different things in your setup and they change, you don't always remember to press all the buttons. So there was a moment last week where I didn't have my teleprompter set up properly, and I'm like, where do I look? Where do I look? It's just like I'm just all over the shop. But anyway, it's great to have you back. And Saeed is in the chat saying hello from Germany and welcoming you back as well. So it's great to have your company and Saeed's company this week. So today on the show, we are going to be talking about video editing, and it's something that we talk about from time to time, but we haven't spoken about in quite a while, I don't think. And somebody
Yeah.
had some questions about it during the week, so I thought it was a good opportunity to bring that up again. So let us know where you're watching us from, because we are going it live to all the various places. And I guess even more than that, I'd be really curious to hear, are you editing at the moment? Do you edit your stuff? Because I know there are lots of people in our little orbit that just do everything live. And they don't always come back to do a lot of editing, which is fine. It's a legitimate way of working. But I'm really,
Sure.
really curious to hear more about that. So I guess, let's just get stuck into the content today. And it looks like we're going to have a bit of a cat cameo every now and then, but that's, what else would you expect from Sam Proof and Kid Avalanche? But we'll talk about
Of
cats more in
course.
a moment anyway. But I guess, first of all, Sam, when it comes to editing, some people love it, some people hate it, and I kind of wonder, like, how do you think people should be thinking about it? Because, and whether people should be doing it at all.
I mean, yeah, I think everyone to some extent, if you're a content creator, you need to be doing some kind of editing at some point. Like it can't all be live because discoverability for live streams is terrible. And discoverability for like VODs is way better. And shorts is its own little beast. But yeah, I think it's definitely a necessary evil, whether you love it or hate it. I'm kind of somewhere in between where I'm actually really good at editing. I also just really don't want to do it if I don't have to do it. So, for me, it's finding out what are those sort of, workflows that are going to make my editing fast and easy and repeatable.
And I guess that's the thing. And in some ways, I think Sam and I are, well, I don't want to say we're opposites, but I guess for me, the thing I have to drag myself kicking and screaming to is actually the recording or the being on camera and being in front of the microphone. I'm actually very comfortable in the editing suite, and sometimes I think I should just be editing other people's content. But I do really like it. But I do like also the idea of simplifying that, and I guess my edits are reasonably minimalist. Like, I don't like to do, and we speak about this a lot on this show. Like, some people will be like, you have to do an edit or a cut every 3 seconds, and I'm like, please don't, that just makes me dizzy. um
Yeah.
but I'll quickly check in with the comments, because there's suddenly a whole bunch coming in. So hello
Yeah.
to Roy Kowalski, who's watching from
Hey, Roy.
Sydney. Hello to Walter Strong the Third from Real Men Rising, who's saying good evening, John and Sam. And Roy is also saying that editing is crucial.
Yep.
And Saeed, because I asked that wonderful question earlier, so he does some editing in DaVinci Resolve 19, but I'd call it more cutting than fancy editing. I think that's fair. And again, I in some ways, I don't know that you need to do fancy editing, but it can be fun and it can be entertaining. And I think it's kind of finding that balance between what is functionally useful in terms of getting to the point, often, because there's a temptation for a lot of people just to hit record and just go on and on and on for 45 minutes and then maybe take 3 minutes out of that. But
Right.
yeah, it's DaVinci Resolve was kind of one of the reasons I got my shiny new computer at the beginning of the year, but I haven't really had much of a chance to play with it. So it's kind of on my to-do list. But I guess, let's talk about that, I guess, before we continue. Like, what are we actually using to edit? So, Sam, I know you do a lot with CapCut.
Yeah. I used to use Adobe Premiere all the time. I was a big fan of Premiere, but uh, when that stopped being something that I was getting as a perk of a job, I didn't want to cover that cost, and CapCut came out, and I was like, well, it's free. Let me see what it's capable of. And I was like, this is really good. Like it does 99% of the things I want it to do. And those things that I can't do, I don't miss. It's more than enough for any starting creator to use.
Hmm. Yeah, I've actually been genuinely impressed by how good CapCut is, given that it has been traditionally free. I know they are definitely pushing those paid features more and more moving forward,
Yeah.
but it's a nice balance because it is not as difficult as DaVinci Resolve or as Premiere Pro. It's a lot
Yeah.
more user friendly for beginners, so I think it's worth checking out. I know it's kind of owned by ByteDance, who also own TikTok, and America has some ongoing beef there, and we're just not sure
Yep.
about what's happening on that front. But I think if
Yeah,
you're
we'll
interested in it,
see.
definitely check it out. The other thing about CapCut too is that it has a desktop version, it has a cloud version, it has a mobile version. So
Yeah.
you can potentially edit on all kinds of different devices. You can share your resources between mobile and desktop and cloud, which can be
Yep.
really useful as well. So that's definitely worth checking out. Um, there's so much going on in the chat, and I love it. But I'm just trying to organize these thoughts. So, again, let's start with Saeed's question. So, how do you organize your recordings, projects, videos, etc.? This frustrates me the most to keep my videos organized. I know Sam has a lot of like he loves a spreadsheet, so we'll talk about that in a second. But I guess what I do, like I have I actually save my projects based on the software that I'm using. So often that will be in Camtasia, which I'll talk about in a second. And then I'll have different projects. So I'll have folders for the video and live streaming show, or for build a presentation muscle, for whatever the various projects are. And then I'll actually have sort of individual episodes, and then sometimes even sort of shorter clips. So I just have this cascading format of different projects and sub projects, and that's kind of how I approach it. But Sam, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the project. Like for Cute Avalanche, I have a very different system than I do for turning our shows into a podcast or my own vlogs and things like that. But generally, I have um, some very similar file structures, and it all starts on sort of that media library uh, level of like just how you organize everything on your desktop. So I have like a template that a long time ago I did some freelance editing with another editor, and he was like, here's my file folder extreme that I use for everything. And I was like, this is great. I've made some modifications to his because he did things like broke things down into, different codexes, and it wasn't something that I necessarily needed. But basically, I have my master folder that I will copy for every project. And then within that, it breaks down into I have like a media folder, which then itself breaks down into video, photograph, and audio. And then within that, those folders break down. So video, I have things like a B-roll folder, a capture folder, and sometimes other stuff. And then audio would be things like voiceover would be one folder, and music would be another folder, though generally that's going to be on a master global level somewhere else. But if there is music specific to that particular project, that goes there. Um, and so on and so forth. I have other folders that we probably don't need to get into for the sake of this, for like documentation and all of that kind of stuff. So it's all kind of in one place. If anyone ever comes at me and they're like, what was the piece of B-roll you used, I can be like, what episode? And I go to that folder and I can go into the documentation and be like, there's my the license for whatever that thing was. So yeah, it starts on that level.
And I think that's actually a really good call out, because if you are using third party resources in your videos, you do need to make sure those licensing arrangements and documentation are in there. I guess like I'm just going to I got to remember the buttons I'm pressing here. So I use Camtasia predominantly to record and edit videos, and the thing about Camtasia specifically, is that it really is designed for screen recordings. And as someone who does a lot of software tutorials, this is kind of really good for me. So I can live in this place. When I'm not in OBS, I'm usually in here. So I just wanted to call something out, which is one of my favorite features in terms of actually working with Camtasia, is they have their own sort of library assets built in here. So the great thing about this is that I can set up a whole bunch of different libraries, and I can sort of organize things in here. And like this isn't exactly from our show, but what conceptually I can do is I can sort of just grab an area of my timeline, and I can right click on this, and I can say add timeline selection to library, and it'll just take all those resources and throw them in there. And that's kind of the thing that I really like when it comes to making shorts from a longer thing, is that I can just take out the segments and I can sort of see how long they are, and I can take them and quickly throw them into a new project and go from there. So it's one of the things I really appreciate about this software. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things as well. So, you know, there's all kinds of things that we can do. But again, I think it's really worthwhile. And it's one of those things that it can be really tempting to just want to run and just throw stuff together and hope for the best. But you will probably thank yourself somewhere down the track if you organize these things as well. So, okay. So Roy mentioned that balance is also important, so not to be too pedantic about that. So Walter writes, I have completely moved away from live streaming to do short videos. The move has forced me to start learning how to do video editing, which I love doing now. So I guess that's the other thing, and I didn't have this in our show notes, but I did mention it in the newsletter during the week, is that live and recorded and edited, they're two perfectly legitimate approaches to creating content. And you can do a lot of the things that we do in video editing software on the fly. How you do those will sort of vary from software to software. So there might be a bit of a learning curve. And frankly, depending on the type of streaming software you're using, you might just need to embrace some of the constraints there. So you might not be able to do everything you want to do. But I think it is really, it's worthwhile thinking these things through. And I guess the other thing too is just that I have no idea where I was going with that second thought. Oh, yes, the other thing was that, of course, you can edit those live recordings afterwards if you want to. But again, it's worth thinking about the kind of inputs you have, because the more you have to work with in video editing software as individual recordings or, you know, different tracks, the more you can do with that. So I'm a bit of a stickler for that. Like, I have 4 different recordings happening simultaneously while we do this show, just so that I've got things that I can potentially edit later on. So again, I'm really curious to hear about what people are using. Again, Walter writes that Canva video editing has been a great place for him to start as a beginner. That's really cool. We do have
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I know Canva does video editing, and I've used it for some really, really short stuff, like under 30 seconds. But once you start to get past that, I feel like Canva's a little limited, and jumping up to something like Camtasia or CapCut would be beneficial for sure.
Sure. We do have a question from Sophia, which is probably a little bit outside of the scope of today's show, but you know, I'll just bring it up quickly. So, how do you guys onboard your clients, and how do you end up with clients booking yourself for them? I personally don't really work with clients right now, and I think you know, that's my thing. I have a full-time job. I barely have time to do this show, let alone entertain clients as well. So I don't know. This might be a topic for a future show that we might want to talk about then, Sam. But do you have any quick thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I'm not sure it really applies to this, because like the kind of clients that I'm working with are brands that I've basically connected through like a marketplace. So it's less of me onboarding them and almost more of them onboarding me. But yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for this right now. Maybe if I
Sure.
had more information though, I could sway, like, you know, lean this in somewhere.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so I just want to check my notes really quickly to see if there's anything I'm forgetting about that we needed to talk about. So I guess really like the other thing too is like, what kind of content are you creating? Like, what is the purpose of the content? Because that'll have a lot of implications for the kinds of edits and cuts you'll need to make. And again, I guess the example that I go to, just because it's an easy example with some very finite constraints, is the YouTube short, because we know it has to be quite short, like 59 seconds or fewer. We're expecting it to be in a vertical format, so we have that constraint as well. So I think it's worthwhile taking a step back, because, and again, like, this isn't even a criticism; it's just an observation. That sometimes, newbies will just hit the record button, they'll just do whatever they want to do, and they'll just publish it as is, which I think is okay when you're starting. But again, think about, respecting your viewers' time and trying to get to the point relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is the video and live streaming show. We're talking all about making edits and cuts, and we'll talk about transitions and effects later on in a moment, but we'll be back just after this.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them.
Mm-hmm.
So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's that's Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. This is the video and live streaming show. Today we are talking all about video editing, cuts, transitions, and effects. Before we move on, I really like this question from Walter. So Walter writes, which 2 video editing software that you mentioned provide additional B-roll, or would I have to look somewhere else for that B-roll? So is there any B-roll sort of built into CapCut that we know of? Like, I guess templates and footage?
I'm not positive if CapCut has B-roll. I know they have sound effects. I know they have stingers and music and tons of effects and transitions. And I'm just not positive if it has stock footage in it. Typically, the stuff I'm doing, I'm usually shooting my own B-roll. The places that I get B-roll from, if I'm not creating it myself, are Pexels, which is free, Creative Commons, which takes a little bit of vetting, and I have a Pond 5 account from when I actually was a stock footage creator, and they actually give out 1 free piece of stock footage every month. So I do have a small collection of that stuff. Saeed says Envanto, which is also a paid stock footage place, but is vast. And I think it's pretty affordable, honestly. So yeah, those are the 4 that I would look at.
It's funny because somebody actually commented on my newsletter during the week about Envato, and back when I used to be more of a web design developer guy, it was very common for resources to end up on that marketplace that people didn't really have the rights to be selling. And that always makes me a little bit nervous about these large marketplaces. So, I do think you need to sort of vet these things very, very carefully and just make sure you've got all the documentation in place. I guess I kind of want to make 2 points about this. And I guess the first one is just, the Camtasia component of this is that they do have their own assets, and they do have things that they can sell you. And some of these are free, and some of them you will need to pay for. And I think Camtasia actually has their own subscription for this these days. And like, they've got callouts and backgrounds and music and audio visualizers and all kinds of stuff in there. But I think in some ways, the broader point that I kind of want to make is just be a little wary of using too much generic stock photography and video, because it never really looks like your content. Like, it always looks like something you've purchased from somewhere else. And I know it's an extra step, but I'd really encourage you to sort of think about just recording elements of your work and your setup that are more native, that coming out of the same potential camera maybe, or from a different angle. Because I think that stuff is much more meaningful, because I think we've all had that experience where we were interacting with a company and then we see their promotional materials, and it's clearly like it's nothing to do with them at all, and we know that instantly, and it's sort of it's a bit jarring. So I kind of want to encourage people to maybe rely on that stuff a little bit less. But again, it's kind of up to you as to what you want to do there. So and Walter writes, I agree Canva is limited with B-roll, but Canva has been really teaching me the basics on the editing. And I think that's great. Like, we try not to be too dogmatic about the tools you use. Whatever works for you, if it's working, that's great.
Right.
You don't need to jump to the shiny new thing every time.
Yeah.
It's just that we reflect on the tools that we use and we're comfortable with.
Yeah. I think my only, like John said, if it works for you, use it. My only sort of warning about Canva is that they do editing in such a different way than the majority of editing software, that I worry anyone who has taught themselves via Canva how to edit will jump over to anything else and be like, well, what the hell is all of this? Because you're dealing with timelines and all of these other things. And Canva, it's almost like a very fancy PowerPoint. It's all slide based.
Yeah, and I think, and again, like we're not picking on Canva, but I guess in some ways, even the graphic side of that, it's much more driven by templates. And frankly, if those templates reflect your business or your project, then by all means run with them. But if they don't, at that point, you're probably going to need to learn a little bit more about graphic design and potentially using different tools. But anyway, let's get stuck into our next segment. So let's talk about cuts specifically. So I guess, first of all, like, what I want you to think about as a video creator is like, what do you want to cut out and what do you want to leave in? And what are actually the most important things? What are the things that your audience needs to know and hear about and potentially see? Yeah. So do you have any thoughts? I mean, obviously, sometimes you'll just hit record and you'll take 5 minutes before you even start talking. That's an easy thing to just cut out and get rid of and move on from. But what other kinds of things are you generally looking for to cut out of video?
So I want to start this off with cuts start in the recording process, right? Like, depending on how you're going about this, you can sort of set yourself up to make editing a lot easier in advance if you're aware of certain things while you're recording. So whether or not you're reading from a script or ad-libbing the entire thing off just some talking points, something that I picked up a long time ago that I really like is when you are doing your script, you're doing your read, your record, and you make a mistake and you're like, I know I'm going to want to get rid of that. You clap or have a clicker so that you mark that down as an audio spike that you can quickly find. And if you continue to make that mistake, you add on an additional click. So if I've made this mistake 3 times, I now see 4 click lines. I can go in and be like, this is the good one, starts right here after the 4 click lines. And everything before that, I'm going to get rid of. And then, you start going again. So if I make a new mistake for a different line, it goes back to 1. So that's just a really quick thing to help you find those in post when you get there. And those are the obvious mistakes is I said this thing 5 different times and I just need it once. But if you're not really going with a script, or if you're just ad-libbing a lot of things from your script, you're going to want to go in and cut out any sort of giant pauses or moments where you're thinking. I don't like to get too small with it. Like, there was a time where I would go in and try and cut out every time I said or add any kind of just dumb word pause thing happen there. But like John said at the beginning, we don't need to cut every 3 seconds. That's Mr. Beast. He does his thing. We don't have to do that thing. There was a time where I did stuff very similar to that, but I think for your own sanity and in a lot of ways your viewer's sanity, you don't have to get that microscopic with it, and really just making sort of smooth chunks of knowledge. Be like, this is a good chunk. Once that's done, you can cut over to whatever the next thing is.
And it's interesting you say that because I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends in the audio podcasting world, they're very adamant that yes, you have to remove every and and you know, maybe like and that's a creative choice. You can do that or you can not do that. But I guess once you add video, the more you cut things out, the more you will notice those jumps in the video. And like in some ways, especially with the introduction of a lot of these softwares where you can edit via transcripts, people take things out, and I'd much rather hear the occasional and rather than sort of just video that jumps all over the place. So that, I guess that's something you want to keep in mind. And I guess the other thing too, whether you're reading from a script, whether you're just talking, if you do trip over your words, and I'm going to tell you this because it's a mistake I've made and I've learnt from, and I think it's worth passing on. I recorded an episode of my podcast and I stuffed up a word and I thought, I'm just going to go from that word and keep going and just splice these things together. And I did, and it wasn't a great experience, and I don't recommend that to anybody. What I really encourage you to do is just take a deep breath and just start from the previous sentence, or, you know, potentially the start of the paragraph, whatever you're looking at.
For sure.
Saeed just has got a few comments in here. So I watched a video on cut-friendly recording that explains how to position yourself for seamless edits when re-recording part of your video. The better the recording, the smoother the editing process. Yes.
Sure.
And especially like a lot of the stuff that we do is just us. But if you're working with actors, if you're working with on-screen talent, and, you know, you don't get the takes that you need, you may not be able to have those things. You may need to book them for another day and book camera people and all other things. So it's really worthwhile to make sure you've got everything you need. And I think in some ways that's where the planning really comes in. And he also writes, one tip was to start with the last sentence from the previous scene for a smooth transition. Although the other thing that occurred to me reading Saeed's earlier comment was, and again, we're very old guys who have been on YouTube for way too long. But back in the day, it was very popular to do the jump cut thing, where you would deliberately reposition yourself in the frame for every sentence, and then you would just cut out the gaps in between. And that was kind of engaging. That was kind of fun. I don't know if it's appropriate for everything, but it does actually make me a little bit reminiscent of the oldie days of YouTube. So I mean,
I still see it being used.
Yeah. And it's still a creative option. So you can check those things out. So I just want to really briefly just talk about how some of this stuff works in Camtasia. And again, this isn't an ad for Camtasia or anything. Use whatever you want to do. And there'll be versions of this that apply to whatever software you're using. But I guess what I kind of want to call out is, and this is just a random project on my computer that, and again, if you watched last week's show, you would have seen me play this. But essentially, all I want to draw your attention to is that we have the ability to sort of split tracks, or split recordings, if you will. So I can literally click on this, and, you know, if this first couple of minutes was not important to this video, and maybe I want to repurpose this as a short, I can come in and delete that. Although the other thing that I really like, and again, this is a feature you'll find in a lot of software, is that if I sort of select a region, I can go to what is called ripple delete in Camtasia. It might be called different things in different softwares. Just keep that in mind. But essentially, it'll delete all of that stuff together. So that's really, really useful. But I guess the other thing is really about the storytelling. So, you know, what is the juiciest part of the story that you're telling, or the thing that you're demonstrating? If you're doing some sort of before and after, do you sort of tease the after at the beginning just to encourage people to keep watching, or do you make them wait for it? There are all kinds of choices in terms of doing that, or potentially not doing that. So
you definitely tease it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say straight out. I mean, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing a cooking video, you show the end before you do the process. It's kind of that thing, like we've talked about this when we talk about thumbnails and titles, where once you've gotten that person into the video, whatever you promised on that title and that thumbnail, you need to prove you're going to deliver on. Showing the finished cake is that proof.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially in food where, you know, if you make people hungry, they will definitely follow along very intently. So that's something you can do as well. I don't want to bore people too much, but I kind of and I didn't even tell Sam I was going to do this, but let's just
What?
run with it a little bit. So again, like I've got this project, and again, I don't know, like this is literally just something random on my computer that I thought I would use as a demonstration for today. But I kind of want to talk about some of the things you can sort of potentially do, and obviously here it is very much a software demonstration. So what I'm going to show you actually is that, you know, first of all, the great thing about Camtasia is that it can record me on camera, on microphone. It can record my computer and also audio from the computer as well, all as sort of separate tracks. So I can do a lot of different things with those. So, I mean, first of all, you know, this recording of me, it is just me in front of the green screen, which you can't see at the moment. And all I do is I go in and sort of remove this color behind me. And that's really just a matter of sort of picking an effect, a visual effect. It's literally called remove a color in Camtasia because they like to keep it really simple. And then I can sort of just go in and find a green shade and adjust the tolerance and the softness and the hue and defringing and whatever else I want to do. But I guess like the only other thing I kind of wanted to mention too is I've got this group here, which is just my screen recording, but it's also got a number of black bars across it just to hide the session IDs because, as you know, if you were on last week's show, that's something you don't want to inadvertently share with people. So whenever you're doing software demonstrations, make sure you don't show people personal private information because that can be a problem. But I guess like I've got these two recordings, and like what I kind of wanted to do here was if I go in and change my project settings, because right now it's sort of a horizontal video, but maybe I want to make a YouTube short. I can apply those things. Obviously, I'm going to have to rearrange some of these things because I'm completely off the camera right now. So I've got to make sure I've got the right button here. So I can sort of bring myself in. I can, you know, resize myself. And I guess the thing about the vertical version of this is a lot of the times I actually do have a horizontal monitor on one side and a vertical monitor on the other side. And if I was just doing this for a vertical video, I would have recorded on that one. But here I'm actually just reusing some stuff. So depending on what I'm doing, like I might want to resize this. I might want to sort of move where this is. And I'll show you more of that in the next segment probably. But essentially I can take these elements and I can rework those. I'd probably want to make myself a little bit bigger in this frame, but again, I can do whatever I want here to make that happen. And, you know, I could come in and bring in different colors and annotations and sort of go from there. But especially if this was, in fact, a short, obviously I've got sort of 7.5 minutes worth of video here. So I'm going to have to go in and find the most salient point for this particular short and find out where that is and what that is, and think about how I'm going to work with that. So I just wanted to sort of mention that for a second. But again, just find those things that are those key points. If you are creating a YouTube short or something where you know you have only a certain number of seconds to work with, I actually really like creative constraints because it gives me something to work with. Even though 9 times out of 10, the point I'm making is like 63 seconds long and I have to be really creative about how I condense that, which is kind of annoying. But yeah,
speed everything up. No.
Well, I see a lot of people doing that. I don't personally love that, but it is potentially a great thing. Saeed said, show the finished cake in part 2 of the video. No. That is so irritating. And I saw that on some version of that on TikTok where they were like, my pet octopus is going to do something amazing. And it's like, not in this video, it isn't. It's just going to tell you that you need to subscribe and follow and all of the things. And again, I don't know who this is, but I suspect Sam does. Reminiscing about the old pizza cooking stream. So Sam used to do like a weekly pizza video back in the day. It's certainly, I think we've made the entire audience really hungry. So we're going to come back and talk about some transitions that you might want to think about. But this is the video and live streaming show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, I'm John Lacey. And in Build a Presentation Muscle, I want to talk about finding your voice, refining and sharing your message, using tools and technology to share that message, and looking after yourself as a creator.
And that's a promo for my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, the podcast about showcasing your expertise through content creation. You can learn more about that over at johnlacey.com. And I just have to say, I'm loving all the cat interaction we're getting on Sam's camera today. It's hilarious. Okay, so this is the video on Livestreaming Show. Let's talk about transitions. So I guess there are a number of different things that fall under this category. And, you know, obviously moving from one scene to another scene is one of those, and you do potentially have a whole bunch of different ways of working with this, whether it's fades or crossfades or sort of really animated transitions. I guess the other thing too is sort of, you know, how can you actually convey, you know, changes within the story itself? So maybe you want to speed something up if you're indicating sort of the passing of time, or maybe, you know, I see a lot of sort of I can't even think of the word for it now, but you know, they'd take a really long time lapse of you know, the sun going down and just speed that up for example. So I guess, you know, is and say it's such a great question. We'll come back to that in a second. But anyway, I guess, like, what do you think we should keep in mind with transitions? Because I'm just going to say it up front. When people start editing video, whether it's on CapCut, whether it's on Windows Movie Maker, they find the love heart transition and they just put it on everything for the rest of time. And I want to tell you that stuff gets really distracting really, really quickly. So yeah. I'd sort of try and be a little bit mindful of the transitions that you use. But Sam, talk to us about those and what you think.
I mean, yeah, I 100% agree on that. Like, no star wipes, no heart transitions, just unless you're specifically doing some kind of like call out to something else that is using a crazy transition like that. Just stick with straight cuts, fades, and maybe one or two other transitions that aren't too jarring, that are part of your catalog of the way things go. The way you should really look at this is, like, if you're doing a longer video, like if you're doing a vertical video that's under a minute, any video that's under a minute, you probably just need to stick with cuts and fades, and probably just cuts. But anything longer where you have sort of distinct segments, you know, in between those segments for the minutia of you know, getting rid of things, you just, again, cuts and fades. But if you have a distinct segment break, where if John and I were doing this show as you know, like a VOD, and we really wanted to put a lot more time into post, in between where each of these tabs happens, we would have a much more distinct, you know, transition. Maybe it's, you know, a bar wipe where everything goes across the screen in these 5 colors. And we're like, okay, we are moving on to something new at this time. But for the most part, if we're just toggling between me and John talking, that's going to be a cut. That's going to be a fade. Probably just cuts for us. Fades are a little softer. It's more of a dramatic thing, cinematic thing. So probably, you know, if you're doing more of a documentarian style thing, you'll go more for fades than cuts. But yeah, that's, I think, how you should look at it, is stick with those two for the ins and outs of 90% of your cuts. And then if you're doing a big topic change, then you have a more bold transition. But again, use that same one. Like, you don't need to use a different one the next video and the next video. No, find those 3 or 4, you know, transitions that work with your stuff, and that is on brand for you.
Absolutely, because I guess it's the thing, like, people need to think about their content as a bit of a library. So, like, I guess, like, I'm gonna do this thing where I share my screen and I'll make myself full screen again. So again, in Camtasia here, like, I've obviously got the ability to sort of make these cuts wherever I want, and you know, and I'll do this actually with the screen capture rather than that. So, you know, what I could do potentially here is, like, this is a cut. So now I have 2 different sections, and I can do really whatever I like here. So I can sort of go into the transitions, and I've got a whole bunch of effects. And if I sort of scroll across those, you'll see what they look like. And some of them are really dramatic, and again, not the kind of thing I would encourage most people to use. Some of them are much more subtle. And it's not to say that you should never use them, but I think you should use them sort of sparingly. So if you really want to draw attention to something that's happening quite dramatically, you can. But I guess that said, like I must admit, I don't make a lot of these kinds of transitions, especially not in a short video. But again, just for the purposes of me demonstrating this, I can drag it and drop it onto part of my timeline now. And if I go back a little bit and just hit play, and I've probably taken us back a little bit too far there, so just bear with me as that actually shows up. In fact, why don't I just speed that up? See, that was, yeah. So, I mean, those circles, I don't know that they really add anything, but they're actually really kind of distracting for me. And I'm also hearing myself, so I'm just going to mute this audio because it's just irritating for me personally. But again, what we can do is I can sort of, I can zoom into the timeline a little bit. And I guess the other thing, the JKL keys are a great way of sort of going into different places here. But if I find where that transition is, I can sort of drag it out and make it longer. So, you know, if that was a bit too quick, I can sort of come in here and press that button, and then you'll see those things fade. So, I mean, they can be quite creative, but again, I'd probably encourage you to use them sort of sparingly. And I'm just going to sort of delete that one there. That said, like there are sort of, there's so many in here, and I think as much as I love Camtasia, I think it is, because it is kind of aimed at an educational market, I think there are fun, trivial things in here that I just wouldn't recommend a real video editor actually play with, because some of them are just a bit strange. So again, I mean, I could show you these for the rest of the time, but I'm not going to do that. But again, see that, I don't know, maybe that might actually be quite effective. So, you know, if I do that, and you've got this thing sort of fading in and out on the top. Like, I don't know. There could maybe be like a legitimate reason for including that. You know, I guess it's kind of up to you as to whether you want to do that or not. But you do have a lot of possibilities. Again, the actual things you'll have access to will depend on, you know, the kind of video you're making. And again, I'm getting roasted in the comments because I did literally mention the heart transitions. But again, let me share that because I think it makes my point really, really nicely here. So, you know, I literally have 6 different love heart transitions here. And again, Camtasia, TechSmith as a company released these on Valentine's Day. So again, it could be possible, like especially I'm thinking for like Sam's content, where you're trying to get people to fall in love with kittens to adopt. That could be a really, really useful and meaningful thing. But again, probably less so for my software tutorial videos. Okay, so we've got those. I guess there is one other thing, and I'm conscious that we don't have a lot of time today, but somebody kind of asked specifically about zooming in and out, because that is kind of something we do see a lot of especially in shorts. Like if you are just a talking head, the ability to sort of zoom in and zoom out, have a little bit of motion there that is maybe kind of subtle. I think that can be quite a useful thing. So if it's okay with you, Sam, I'm just going to talk people through that for a second.
Go right ahead.
Okay, cool. All right. So again, this will vary from software to software, but again, because I'm using Camtasia, and I'm going to do this here for me on camera. And again, it's not a particularly flattering view, but it is what it is, people. It is what it is. So here we've actually got what we call animations. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to lock this other track, because I don't really, in fact, I might even hide it for the moment, because I don't want any of these changes to happen to the other track. I just literally want it to happen to me. So you know, I can actually drag what we call a custom animation onto my timeline. And this is an arrow, and I'm just zooming in so you can get a better sense of what this is. So in some ways, it's going to animate from different properties. So, you know, if I start here and I'm at this size, and then maybe I go to wherever this ends, I can decide that, you know, maybe I want to be larger in this frame. Again, you probably want to be a little bit mindful about how large you are in the frame, that you're not sort of stretching out to a point where it's pixelating. But again, you know, it could be that I just do this and I sort of very quickly go in the frame. It could be that actually I want this to be a much longer transition, and I can drag this out as long as or as short as I want it to be. And you can actually animate a whole bunch of different properties. So again, in some other software, this will be sort of described as keyframe animation. But essentially, all we're sort of doing is doing that. And I guess the great thing about the way this works in Camtasia is I can, and again, I don't know if this is a great use case for this, but I can actually potentially come in here and just paste, I could just duplicate this effect and reuse it somewhere else. Although it's not actually going to let me do that because of course it won't, because we're live and that's how those things work. But again, I just wanted to say, like, again, like the specifics of this will vary a little bit from software to software, but if you do want to introduce some motion in there as well. The other thing too is we do actually have other animations, but we've also got these things called behaviors. So I don't know how well these are going to particularly work for here, but like if I come in here and I grab this drifting one, for example, it's probably going to be really weird if it works at all. In fact, I'll go to during. If there was something you wanted to keep moving throughout here, you could potentially do that as well. But I don't see, you can sort of see it's going up and down, which is kind of weird to have on a camera, but it could be great for something that's a call out, a QR code, a call to action, that kind of thing as well. So we've got all those kinds of things to play with. And again, a lot of these are really good for, like, if you want text to sort of fly into the screen or pop up, or, a little banner, that kind of thing. So there's a lot that we can potentially do with all of that. So in some ways, it is really just a matter of testing things out and trying them out. But I guess to Sam's point, it's a really good idea that you think about what actually makes sense for your content, what's on brand for you. We've had some interesting questions. I'll come back to that after the break, but this is the Video and Live Streaming Show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey gang, if you need help running a live stream or optimizing your YouTube channel, get in touch with me. I can help you get set up with live streaming, operate your stream, strategize your YouTube channel, and so much more. Hit me up at samproof.tv, and I'll talk to you soon.
And that's a promo for Sam's live stream production services. So if you need help with any of that stuff, you can reach out to him at samproof.tv. Okay, we're going to talk about effects in just a moment, but I do want to check in with some of these questions. First of all, from Saeed, any tips on creating seamless loops? I see a lot of people making great shorts where you can't tell where they start or end. I guess in some ways, and again, I'm really curious to hear what Sam thinks of this, but my inclination is to just say whatever you want to say or demonstrate whatever you want to demonstrate, and then take the clip, actually cut out the first line and move that to the end. So you're actually starting the video somewhere in the middle, but the end part of that will sort of come again. So often you'll have somebody say, do you know in Camtasia you can do XYZ? And they'll actually move those words, do you know, to the very end. Because at that point, it's almost like the video is starting again, and you don't know that you've effectively reached the end of that. Again, I think all the points Said made earlier about making sure you don't move around too much, making sure that you're still in the same place in the frame, are good points as well. But that's kind of my instinct about this. And I don't spend a lot of time making those kinds of clips, but I am curious what your thoughts are, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of clips, you really need to like sit down with it, and like that's not something that should just be like, I'm gonna ad lib this. Like, you need to know like what those words are that you want to hit. So basically what John said, but you're actually going to break that sentence in half. So it starts with half of that sentence, the end of that sentence, and then ends with the beginning of that sentence. So it comes back to the perfect, clip of it. I don't know if I explained that well at all.
No, I can appreciate what you're saying there. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, you should definitely like have that scripted out, at least that one line that you want, because in that line, you need to have the halfway point be a really good starting hook, but also have that beginning of that sentence also be sort of a hook in itself, so it hooks back into itself, so people fall for the loop. And then just in practice, having a good player like VLC where you can actually watch it on loop to make sure that it is seamless and there is no obvious like weird jump or anything like that is extremely useful.
Yeah, and I think like some software will video editing software will actually let you sort of play the loop, and I don't think that's something Camtasia actually does. But there are
Yeah,
sort of other examples of that. And again, and it's funny too because in some ways, you know, that thing that you're saying on camera kind of acts as a sentence with a full stop at the end, but also potentially a question mark. So you kind of need to think about your vocal inflection there as well too. But
sure.
yeah, that's probably something some people devote their entire lives to. And again, my least favorite topic in the world, but hey, someone asked the question, so we better answer it. How far in the future do you guys think it'll be before you're able to use AI to do all video editing for you? Well, I think there are a lot of people out there that are currently already doing that. So, you know, they take whatever source material they've got and they just say, hey, make me a video, especially in terms of the repurposing content aspect of
Yeah.
this. I don't know. You know, if you're new here, you may not know, but I'm not a fan of generative AI in any capacity, and I try not to use it at all. But I guess, you know, there's sort of the content aspect of that. Does the AI really understand what the important part of the content actually is? But
Right.
also, I see a lot of people that'll take a horizontal stream just like the one that we're doing right now, and they'll try and either they personally or the AI tools will try to sort of stretch it into a fashion to fit a vertical frame, and it just never works. And I
Yeah.
know, like I mentioned earlier, I have sort of four different things running, four different recordings happening here at any given point in time. So I can repurpose and have a little bit more control. And admittedly, some of that's probably me being a control freak. But some of that is just because I know of the creative possibilities it'll give me, you know, if I do come to edit it. But again, Sam, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see something that's much more advanced in the next year. Currently, the state of AI editing is basically what John was saying, where it will convert a horizontal to a vertical. So it'll just trim. It doesn't do any real intuitive editing. It just finds a 60-second or 30-second soundbite, and it just chops off the tops and tails. Um, and really, what we need in the future is something that goes in, finds what a good hook is, and then finds what a really good supporting sentence or two is to that, instead of it just kind of looks for a good hook and says, I hope this is it, and finds a good cutoff point, and then that's it. So, yeah, it needs to actually be able to move stuff around. The other tool that's out there is kind of along the lines of stuff we were talking about before, where there are a lot of editing AIs that will look for jumbled words or dead space or ums and ahs, and will cut out all of those for you and just give you a tightened version of your edit. Most of those are also tied to some text-based editing services as well, which is, I think, better because at least you can go in and then sort of rearrange the clips on your own to make them a little more interesting. Though I, for some reason, just have the worst time trying to use that interface.
And I guess that's a really good call out because some of these tools, they're like, here's your final product. You have to live with it exactly how it is. And some
Yeah.
of them do give you a little bit more customization options at the end. So again, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of up to you what you want to do. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of these things, but I know there are definitely people out there using them, and they seem to like them. And again, it honestly, a lot of this probably is just me being a control freak, but I really do like to handcraft the things that I put out into the world. But that's that's just me. I just want to say hello to Chocolate Quilts, who's joining us, and Roy, Tech Troublemaker as well. Thanks for being here, you two. Let's get stuck into the last segment. So let's talk about effects because, again, effects can be so much fun, but they can be really overused really, really quickly. So I just want to and again, this is a lot of this is probably me just being a minimalist at the best of times. Like I kind of want people to be listening to me and the things I'm saying, not necessarily distracted by the shiny things happening around me. And I think that's kind of a problem sometimes with video templates is they don't know your content, so they're just trying to make pretty things around you.
Mhm.
But I guess let's talk about video effects. When do you think they can be useful in terms of sort of adding to a story, or dramatic effect or emotional impact?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends, what is the video you're making, who is the audience that is attracting, and then there's just so many possible effects out there, and every software is going to have different versions and different exclusive ones and things like that. So again, along the lines of transitions, you don't want to go so crazy with it. You want to pick a few that are in heavy rotation for you for specific accents on different things. And effects can really just be as simple as uh, like minor adjustments to like things like brightness and contrast or vignettes. It doesn't have to get more complicated. You don't have to put the matrix neon green letters over like over your video feed. Like, that's great for a gag, and I've totally done it, but it's not something you should have in heavy rotation. So uh, I would limit your effects to maybe 5, depending on what you're doing and who your audience is and stuff like that. And yeah, just make a note of like, I have that style guide. I always refer to my style guide. Put it down there. Like, these are the effects that I'm using, and this is when I'm using it. Like, if I want to show that I've gone back in time, I'm going to desaturate things and and maybe add a vignette to it. That's what that is. That's when that gets used. You've seen that a million times 5 years ago, and suddenly we're black and white, whatever it is. So like, I think you take a lot of good cues from when movies use certain effects. People, come to expect it in that particular situation. If I am talking about something that happened in the past and I don't even bother putting a caption on, but all of a sudden I'm playing a clip and it's black and white and in a vignette. A vignette, for anyone who doesn't know, is the edges of the screen get darker than the center of the screen gets brighter. You're probably going to have an intuitive experience of like, oh, we're back in time because I've seen this a million times. Don't reinvent the wheel.
And I think that's kind of an interesting thing about TikTok, is that there is certain music and certain audio that is it's just become sort of canonically the sad music or the dramatic music or the spooky music, which in some ways I think kills creativity a little bit, but in other ways I think it is really interesting because the minute you hear it, you kind of know what you should be feeling. I just want to say too, Roy made this joke in the chat. He said, "I have to have shiny things around me since I am not interesting." And like, admittedly, Roy has had a LED curtain behind him at times, but he almost has 1,000 subscribers, so he's doing exponentially better than me. So I'm sure he's actually really interesting in real life. But thank you so much for that. I guess a part of me need to press that button a little bit harder. So, it's so funny that Sam was literally talking about glitching effects, because they're often the things that I find really, really fun. So, and again, like, especially, I've got sort of a glitch thing, and especially when you're scrolling in one of those short form vertical formats, where suddenly a weird interruption or a weird thing might actually capture your attention and keep you watching.
Yeah.
That can be really, really fun. And I literally just picked that one at random, but I kind of love it. I'm going to have to use that in something a little bit later on. But all right. So there's so much great stuff. And, there's a whole discussion about AI. And like, the thing I'd say to everybody is, look, I'm not your dad. I'm not your boss. Do whatever you think is appropriate. I just don't think it's appropriate for me. Like, it makes me feel sad for all the people. And I say that because I see so many people using it to produce really awful, low quality crap, and just there's enough of that on the internet as it is. So put a little bit of effort in and make something you can be proud of. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. So we are kind of running out of time, so make sure you like and subscribe this wherever you happen to be watching it. We really appreciate that. But Sam, if people want to learn more about you and where they can watch your content and all that good stuff, where can they go?
Yeah, head over to samproof.tv. You can find all my socials at the top left there and join me over on whatever platform you like. If you didn't get enough cats today, which we had a lot more than normal, head over to cuteavalanche.com and enjoy the 24/7 cat cam. Currently doing a playlist of our featured fosters as we're not fostering at the moment, but enjoy some cuteness.
Absolutely. And if you want to catch up with anything I'm doing, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I got a whole bunch of articles in the podcast and different things, and there are social media links at the bottom of all those pages. So come and find me. I hang out on YouTube and LinkedIn especially. It's so funny. Everyone's talking about AI and automation, and one thing I kind of forget is I have this batch process that happens at 10 a.m. my time every single day, and it just popped up then to distract me. But anyway, have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's been great to have Sam back here, and been great to have so many people in the comments. We really do appreciate it. I can't not acknowledge this comment because it was hilarious. Farquad writes, "I can produce my own low quality crap without AI." I mean, there's an element of that as well. So don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you happen to be watching this. But yes, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.